Sardines with tomato and lemon, whipped up in seconds, in front of your eyes.
Delicious.
If you don't like it, tough, because it's all that you're getting. Well, I got my audience with the Queen tonight. I've got to prepare for Prime Minister's questions. I've got a lot of reading and a lot of work to do. Go to bed, probably with my question time file, as opposed to with my wife. With both, possibly. So I'm basically going to be here all day. But it's a pretty typical Tuesday.
The Sun were invited to spend an entire day behind the scenes with the Prime Minister. This exclusive video gives a real taste of what life is like in Downing Street, balancing the responsibility of running the country with everyday family life, from early mornings through cabinet meetings, quick snacks for lunch whilst pondering your audience with the Queen, and in a world first, we attach a video camera to the most powerful man in Britain and actually see the world through his eyes. This is a day in the life of Cameron.
There's something about, just not being able to pop downstairs, pop out and get a pint of milk and a newspaper. Even though if you're here at the weekend, it's lovely, you've got a great view. Right now the sun's shining, but you can't just sort of, you can go for a walk in the park or something, but you can't sort of just wander off to the shops.
Yeah.
So that is a bit peculiar. So the day-to-day, working from 6 to about 8, shower, breakfast with the kids, downstairs, 20 past 8, Conservative ministers 8:30 to 9:15, Cabinet 9:30, 10:30. Then I recorded some messages for Easter, Vasaki, some radio interviews I was doing. Then I have got my 4 o'clock daily meeting, which happens pretty much every day. Then Prime Minister's questions prep. Then audience with the Queen. Then there's leaving party for one of my advisors. And then a bit more PMQ's prep. And up here, probably about 7:45. So you are dodging between topics, but if you do enough preparation...
But when do you get the time to do the preparation? Well,
in the morning.
Meeting the President of Sri Lanka.
Well, that's why the 6 o'clock to 8 o'clock in the morning is so essential.
At 7 a.m, all is calm in the kitchen. Kids are nowhere to be seen or heard as Dad sits down over a cuppa and looks through his diary for the day. A typical scene in millions of homes across Britain. Except this Dad is pondering how to greet the President of Sri Lanka. The PM begins every day with 2 hours of work from his prime ministerial box. Reading briefing notes, signing letters and considering policy notes before discussing them with his team. After a quick shower and change, it's time to start the working day with a political cabinet meeting. As this is a coalition government, Conservative cabinet ministers gather to discuss Conservative issues ahead of the wider cabinet meeting.
You've got to read up on the subject before the meeting. Not just read the brief, but then also sit back and think, right, okay, I've read that, now what do I think? What are we trying to achieve in this meeting? You're not always going to make the right decisions, but you have to think hard, do your best, make decisions, chair meetings properly, turn up on time for things. Everything here, I think my team will say, everything starts on time, finishes on time. I'm quite a stickler for that, because otherwise the system sort of falls apart.
Unless your name's Michael Gove.
Come on, Michael. Matt, come on. Hurry up, start meetings on time. Right, morning everyone. Welcome to, this is probably the second or third last meeting of Conservative ministers before the election. Obviously we have Cabinet coming up at 9:30, but I thought it would be useful to get together. We've got 57 days to go until that election, but a lot of important things to do in government and in Parliament between now and then. I thought we'd talk about today is education. We launched the new wave of free schools yesterday. Nikki and I did that in Brentford and Isleworth. I think it went down well. Yeah. 500 schools planned for the next Parliament, and 400 would have been set up during this Parliament. We've also got Theresa's extremism strategy, which is an absolutely vital piece of work, so I thought we could discuss that as Conservative ministers this morning as well. And then we can have a general update on the campaign and other things.
And then as the Lib Dems arrive for the Cabinet meeting, there's just enough time for a quick coffee or game of Candy Crush. Only joking, William.
Cabinet is it's a big meeting. You've got over 20 people there. welcome. I think this is probably the third, or possibly fourth last cabinet of this Parliament, but welcome. We've got a pretty packed agenda. We're going to start with apprenticeships this morning. We've had the meetings where you're forming and making decisions. Those need a lot of preparation because you've really got to think through, right, where do I want this to end up? And not just have I read the brief and understood the facts and figures, but sit back, take the big picture, what's the government trying to achieve? Any health statistics out tomorrow?
The diagnostic test brings out tomorrow, so they'll obviously be interested in sort of that will then feed in.
That's the one where you've got the big increases in things like MRI scans, CAT scans, colostomies, all those things. You are very conscious that you've got to do the job. You've got to get up in the morning, and there are lots of decisions you've got to make. And if you don't make the decisions, the whole thing will grind to a halt.
The press obviously play a huge part in how a government are perceived by voters, and it's important to the Prime Minister how his messages are portrayed in social media. But round-the-clock news is sometimes a bit too much.
Facebook's a new thing to me. I wasn't. But I am now slightly strangely, following myself on Facebook because I want to know what people who are following the Conservative Party or the government, what are they getting? What do they see? And it'd be a bit like not reading the Sun newspaper. If you don't if you're not on Facebook, they're not actually experiencing the media as other people are experiencing it. I don't listen to the news, or I don't have the television on in my office. I don't have the radio on while I'm working. I try not to have, otherwise the 24-hour media news just sort of gets all over you. So a quick check in the morning, check in the evening, and Craig and Graham to keep me up to date with what's happening in the world.
Most weeks, the PM will make time to answer questions put to him from regional newspapers and radio stations he hasn't had the chance to visit recently.
So you're starting with Heart and Capital in the North West.
Right.
Presenter Alison Spooner.
Right.
Leading on free schools and the announcement made yesterday.
Yes.
And added a little extra briefing to some schools in Warrington.
Right. Okay.
And I'll just get the line established.
Good.
The Guardian ran a story this morning that Blackburn has the highest number of free schools out of any local authority. It's not entirely accurate that Bradford does, but Blackburn has the highest in the North West. So
what are the results like there?
they're good. The Tawhid Islam Boys School is rated outstanding in 2014, so that's 1%.
Alison, hi, it's Michael. Okay. Great, okay. Well, the Prime Minister's with me now.
I can't do multimedia, it's too complicated for me. I'm a man, I can't multitask, what do you expect? Right, yeah?
All yours, Alison.
Thanks.
Worst part of the day, Prime Minister's Questions is the worst part of the day. Worst part of the week. Particularly the 10 minutes beforehand, because you're sitting there in your office just thinking, oh my God, what are they going to ask? What am I going to get? But worst part of the job is the worry about troops overseas, hostages, life and death situations. I mean, those are, someone has to take the decisions and take the responsibility, and that's the biggest burden of office, and one that stays with you.
Briefly touching on the ordinance of the Queen, without, of course, discussing what you discussed with her.
Not going to make that mistake again.
Every week, the PM attends a private meeting with the Queen or has a phone call to update her on the week's events and issues. Even though the distance between Downing Street and Her Majesty is a mere 1,400 yards, the trip is planned with military precision, with armed guards and a police escort.
There is someone who's, I'm her 12th Prime Minister, they've heard it all before, but someone who's just the total, I was going to say apotheosis, that's the right word, the total pinnacle of public service, someone whose whole life has been dedicated to public service, and you're reporting to her, and that's a source of great pride. And I think all Prime Ministers have felt that. So it might be a dignified part of the Constitution, but it's sort of an efficient one too, in a way. But it has a good purpose, because you take the three biggest issues of the week, and running through them actually helps you to order your own mind. So if, for instance, it is ISIL, radicalisation, Iraq and Syria, Ukraine and Russia, what we're doing actually today on the sort of Troubled Families programme, those three subjects, actually trying to think through the best way of explaining what the big picture, what the government's trying to do and how it's going, it kind of helps you sort it out in your own mind. But it wasn't me that said it, but someone said no Prime Minister ever leaves those meetings without feeling a few inches taller. I don't know who did say it, but it's definitely true.
In a world first, we were allowed to attach a camera to the PM and get a real feel for being in charge. Ed, Nick, Nigel and Natalie, this is what it's like returning from seeing the Queen and walking into number 10 as Prime Minister.
So far, yes. Hi there, evening, all well? So that is a mere 13-hour day. That's short. Well, not short, but that is, often you do the same thing, but you'd be having a dinner or something else. So what do we think? Sardines a la Cameron?
Very good.
Ripped off from someone else's book, but it's quite good. Edible. Right, that's it. Long day. You can't go straight to bed because you've made a speech and your mind's still sort of zizzing, and so you kind of probably sit down, watch television, read a book for 20 minutes just to calm down. So probably bed after 11. I sleep okay. You know, I mean, there are nights when you don't sleep because you're worried about something on the other side of the world, but generally I try and get some sleep in and up at before 6. Thanks guys, I think that's enough for today.